Nobody Asked Me Guys show. Listen, I am. Hold up. Okay, we didn't start. Let me start the broadcast. Okay. Yep. I'm gonna have to edit this first. Should have kept my glasses on. So good evening. I am Melvin Lars, host of the Nobody Asked Me show. We have an exciting guest with us this evening, Ms. WInifred A. Winston. And Ms. Winston is an advocate for dyslexia in education as a whole. She's an editor, author, speaker, and a business coach. So maybe she'll give us a few pointers on business as we work through this piece. She's also an administrator of a special education school and founder of Dyslexia Advocation. Now, after working for public school districts and going through the IEP process with her daughter, Winfred quickly realized African American parents lacked access to accurate information about dyslexia interventions and instructional strategies. With established industry contacts and a desire to help others, she founded Dyslexia Advocation, and she's going to be speaking with us about that and exactly what that covers. But it's to educate, empower, and equip parents with tools to successfully advocate for their children with dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia. You have to help me with that one, Ms. Winifred, and all other languages learning differences. As you can see, I have a language learning difference because I'm having difficulty pronouncing dyscalculia. Looks like. Outside of work, Winifred is a volunteer state leader for Dyslexia Grassroots Organization and co-founder of their local advocacy and support group for parents and children in Baltimore, Maryland. Welcome to the Nobody Asked Me Guys show, Ms. Winifred Winston. How are you this evening?
I am well. I'm excited to be here. I am excited. Thank you for having me.
And we are doubly excited that you're here. And we just are very happy that you accepted our invitation to come on the show and talk with us this evening. So if you will, if we can dive right in here, usually we start talking about what the total topic is, but a little birdie flew on my shoulder, and I heard that you were quite the track athlete. Do you mind sharing some of that with us about your athletic?
That was so long ago, but you know what? We're right on the heels of me being inducted to my high school's athletic Hall of Fame. So wow. In high school, yes, 2018. So in high school, I ran track, indoor track, and cross country. And so I was a state champion at 800 meters. And I did go on to college and get recruited to run in D1, Division I. And then later ran Division 2 or 3. I left that school and earned MVP and, a lot of accolades along the way. But I'm most proud of the state championship and then also being inducted into my high school's athletic Hall of Fame. Like that was just icing on the cake.
Fantastic. I'm so happy to hear you say that because you put a big dent in the myth about the dumb athlete, having been you going into your being inducted into your high school Hall of Fame and you running in a Division I school and you have the mantra of being a state champion and the whole nine. And I know that you are an excellent, outstanding educator. So that just makes it all the better. And if you, as we get started, give me a moment to just thank our friends who are with us already. We have Ms. Tachi, who she's a Periscope guru among many other things as well. We have Pat with us. We have Kente with us, and I want to say hello to all of them. And I also want to share with them, Ms. Winifred, that we have 2 cameras open, and they are more than welcome to jump in at any time. So I have utmost respect. They bring it, and I will be tickled to death if either of them, 2 of them, all would take one of these cameras as we move forward through this process. Now, as we discuss athletics and move on into dyslexia, as I said in our opening and information that we've shared, I know that you started a group and you advocate for, dyslexia advocation. But, I told you before we came on air that I was one of those individuals that from the old days, basically people only talked about boys having dyslexia, and it was never associated with young ladies. So can you kind of give us an overview of dyslexia and who it affects and how it affects those persons?
Okay, so dyslexia, not only was there a myth that it only affected boys, but it was a myth that dyslexics see reversals, right? They see B and D reversed. Everyone would say, oh, they mix up the letters. And dyslexia is neurological in origin, and it's a language-based learning difference. And it affects just as many boys as it does girls. Mm-hmm. And it impacts reading comprehension, reading fluency, spelling, and writing. I just read a report. There are 40 million people with some form of dyslexia, because it ranges from mild to severe, and only about 2 million people know that they are dyslexic.
Wow.
So they say 1 in 5 people have some form of dyslexia. Mm-hmm. So currently, it's a problem, and people are aware, but obviously a lot of people are not aware. And what we're finding is that a lot of educators aren't aware. And that's a huge concern.
Well, actually, that's a major concern, because I was one of those educators, and I thought myself to be one of the many that was pretty much on top of academics and how it works, even with our special needs students, etc. And as you share that with us, I mean, it's an eye opener just in these brief moments that you're sharing. Now, as we continue to move into dyslexia, I kind of jumped the gun a little bit. Can you kind of share with us, as far as the educational process goes, were you always interested in becoming an educator, or was it something that just kind of fell in your, I won't say fell in your lap, because obviously that would not be correct, but is it something that just kind of projected itself upon you?
It's funny how I got to education, because I worked in sales right out of college. My undergrad was broadcast journalism. Never worked a day in that field. By my senior year, I switched to public relations, and I did my internship, as life would have it, with Special Olympics North Carolina. Yeah. And look where I am now, right? And I always volunteered with Special Olympics. And I was here, I moved from North Carolina to Maryland, and I've always been involved in community service, volunteer work. And I thought, well, I can't do rape crisis training in Baltimore. I'm a little scared because I did that in North Carolina, but what can I do to help people? And so I started doing resume writing, working with women recently released from prison, overcoming drugs and alcohol, or who are homeless. And then I started surrounding myself with HR people and recruiters. And I thought, hey, I want to work in HR. How can I help people? So I started researching different careers and different avenues to follow. And I felt like higher education, career services was my area. Like I said, I think I would like that. And so I went into higher education first under student affairs. But what I quickly realized, students weren't prepared. And then I also worked in HR. So I needed to understand how employers hired and understand that. And I got a master's in HR development, so I could understand how employers hire and how to develop candidates so they can be successful and get careers and not jobs. And in doing that, there's this class called Career Research and Development, or Career Development. It may be a 1-credit course. It may not even be a credit course. Nobody takes the class. You only find out about teaching this class if you know someone by networking. I wonder how many people on the podcast ever took Career Research and Development or visited their career center.
Not I.
Exactly. So while I was working in the career center, a lot of students would come in and say, oh, my marketing professor helped me with my resume. And I'm like, well, when's the last time he applied for a job? Like, this resume isn't good. Well, my statistics professor, he said I need to do this on the resume. I'm the professional. So what I realized is they believe anything the professor says. So I said, well, how can I get in the classroom? And so I started as an adjunct professor, and I sought out that class, Career Research and Development, and I taught 2 sections at one of our local universities. And then, as life would have it, my friend called me up and said, hey, you want to come teach in Baltimore City? I was here in Maryland, but I wasn't working in the city at the time. I have a Career Research and Development. And I thought, wow, I can get them at the high school level. And then I went down to K-12. And now I'm a administrator at a special education school where we teach children with dyslexia, ADHD, and high functioning autism and other language learning differences. But, you know, as life would have it, now I'm back in that space with children with special needs.
Yeah. Wow. Now that is a fantastic journey. As we talk about education and people wonder why people get into education or how you actually transcended into education. So, you know, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Oh, I think your screen is frozen. And if
Live.
okay, okay. You're back with us now.
Oh, okay.
No, the screen had frozen momentarily.
Okay.
Now, you know, I was going to ask you about specific incidents, and you've already shared that with us about what really interested you in going into that area and sharing your expertise. And you know, are there any tall tales or telltale signs that we as parents or we as interested parties, even educators, are there any telltale signs as it relates to dyslexia that might give us a clue or set off a red flag or something?
Yes, absolutely. So my journey into education was one thing. So I was an adjunct instructor. Then I worked in K-12, you know, in high school. But it wasn't until my daughter, who at the time she was about 5. She's my only child. She's in a house with 2 adults. We poured into her, right? And about 5 years old, I really started getting concerned. As bright as she was, and every parent says that, oh, I have a bright child, my child's bright. But my daughter's vocabulary was extensive. At 3 years old, she was saying defecate. She was very verbal. She asked a lot of questions. She was very inquisitive. And I just felt like, oh, she's an old soul. You know, she's in a house with 2 adults. Now in kindergarten, she got valedictorian of her graduating class, but I had to pull her from the reading group. So I would tell her dad, like, she's the valedictorian of what? Like, she's not reading, because I'm thinking you need to learn how to read. And I'm reading to her every night. You know, we read to her. She did summer enrichment. That's what I call it, because I felt like we needed to keep it going. We were at a private school. So we transferred to a public charter school. I made them aware. I said, 1, her handwriting will be sloppy. She learned cursive in private school. And she's already told me here in public school, they write print. So she's going to write print. Remember that, because we're going to come back to the cursive. And then I told them I was concerned because I didn't feel like she was reading where I thought she should be. And so they did what's called an SST. They did interventions, like accommodations. Let her know that we're going to call on her, repeat instructions, and different things like that, just to see if it would help. And then the reading specialist was working with her a little bit. So towards the end of that year, they said, oh, we've seen some progress. I said, well, no, not really, not enough to me. And they said, well, you have the option now, since you did the SST, if you want to get her evaluated. And they were very delicate when they said that. They were very like, you know, we can evaluate her. We're not saying, and I immediately jumped in and was like, no, let's get her evaluated. I'm not one of those parents. Like, let's find out so we can cross some things off the list, because I still feel like something is missing. My baby isn't learning to read. And so we evaluated her, but some signs were she did not remember sight words. We did the flashcards. She would have spelling tests. She remember those words. She'd make 100 on the spelling test. The next week I try to add 5 words to the new 5 words, 10 words. It's like she never learned the 5 words. And I didn't know what that was. I'm just like, she's not even remembering. Or she would read and she would try to decode, sound out. I hate teacher talk. That's what I call that stuff. Decode, phenome, all that's teacher talk. I just want to speak English, because everybody's not an educator. So she's trying to sound out every word. In sight words, you can't sound them out. So a lot of dyslexics will struggle with sight words. They will struggle with learning their alphabets. They will struggle with math concepts. And what the problem is, there's a problem with associating the sound of a letter to the letter, the actual sound that the letter makes. So someone with dyslexia might not realize, a younger kid, an elementary kid might not realize that bird and bat has the same letter.
Mm-hmm.
B. It starts with B. So that that sound and letter recognition, that's where the deficit is. So once we had her evaluated, the school system deemed her eligible for an IEP because she fell, within one of the 13 disability categories, which was specific learning disability. Okay. And they said specific learning disability in reading. Mm-hmm. And it had some teacher talk. I actually, you know what? I want to read the teacher talk because as a parent and as a former educator, I didn't know. Here we go. So specific learning disability, weakness in visual perception, spatial reasoning, and visual motor integration that are consistent. Well, the next part says with the identification of dyslexia, because I fought for that. But as a parent, even as an educator, you tell me she has a specific learning disability, weakness in visual, blah, 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 because that's what I'm thinking. What is it? And I kept pressuring them. I'm like, well, what is that? Could you explain that? How can I help her? She's not learning to read. And at the very end of that IEP meeting, someone slipped up and said the word dyslexia. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, does she have dyslexia? No. We don't diagnose. We no. And I'm like, well, somebody just said that. Like, well, what's dyslexia? How do I find out about dyslexia? And this was on a Monday. Mm-hmm. And by Wednesday, I had my daughter at a learning center that tutored children with dyslexia and other language-based learning differences, because I started researching. I Googled everything. I called my cousin, who's a special education attorney, and she was like, oh, there's places you can go. And she was very just nonchalant and casual with me. Yeah, I figured something was going on, but you're her mom. You had to figure it out. And by Wednesday, I had her at a center. But once I got the word dyslexia, not specific learning disability and all that womp. Once I got the word dyslexia, I just took off from there.
Wow. If I might give me a moment to, again, welcome Frazier, welcome Pat, Kente, and Tachi, etc. And again, I'm inviting Dr. Tachi, Kente, Pat, Frazier, and you guys grab one of those cameras and come on and do some FaceTime with us, and let's talk to Ms. WInifred, because she is really smoking things up here. I want to take you back, if you will, please. You alluded earlier as to how we, as individuals, are so stuck on this that we, a lot of times you say you learn just enough to be dangerous, and you talk about dyslexia, and everybody think that it's just when you reverse the words, and if you kind of hit that again, because that's a very important point that parents need to hear.
Yes, so it is so much. It's neurological in origin, and let me also add that it is hereditary. Okay, so it's passed down in the genes. And what we realized during this process was that her dad is dyslexic, never identified, never knew, did not have a clue, but knew he struggled in school. And I knew he struggled because he was in college and I was reading the papers, and he's not putting the end of words like ED.
Yes.
And I'm thinking it's his Baltimore accent, because we in Baltimore City. And so I'm thinking, it's the accent. He's writing how he speaks, but he wasn't hearing the sounds of the letters. And he's never been diagnosed officially, but we were at a training, a speaking event, and they were going over the signs, and he looked at me and said, I got it. I said, you have what? He was like, I'm dyslexic. And then I think a light bulb went off, and he just thought about all the challenges, that he went through in school, not knowing, but knowing something wasn't connecting for him. So it's neurological in origin. It is hereditary. So if an aunt, an uncle, a sibling or a parent, and what I like to think is back in the day, you have families where grandma read everything because grandpa, smart as a whip, could do anything with his hand, but he couldn't read.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
Like, wait a minute, smart as a whip, but he's not reading a newspaper. She is, and that's a big thing. And what I found is in the African-American community, it was not discussed a lot. Nobody talked about it. I still have parents who struggle with the identification. the labeling rather. I don't want to label my child, but it is not just reversals of B and D. It's reading fluency, spelling, writing. They have trouble remembering the alphabets, math concepts. They see things and learn differently. So some children can just pick up reading. Dyslexics have to be taught how to read. Therein lies when we move to higher education and we find that the higher education programs aren't teaching the science of reading. They aren't teaching teachers how to teach reading.
Right.
And so that's a problem.
Please allow me just to say very quickly, that was one of my biggest challenges as a principal, trying to get that across to my bosses, when I'd have to challenge my teachers. And when you talk about teaching across the curriculum, and they would fight vehemently. Well, I'm not a reading teacher. I teach, etc. And it was very difficult. And I'm so happy that you shared this, that you're sharing this. It was so difficult as an administrator to get my bosses to understand that it wasn't me just being too tough on the teachers, is that they were not equipped to teach our children. And I was always one of those fix-it principals. Yep. And so it was very difficult. But I'm so happy that you are explaining this to us. And if anyone else have a question, please feel free to jump right in, and I will obviously yield the floor.
Yeah, and let me add that my daughter's general educator, she said to me, well, I don't know how to teach a child with dyslexia. I don't know what to do with her. Her second grade teacher told me that. And, dyslexics need multi-sensory structured literacy approach, right? And so like I said earlier, she wasn't remembering flashcards, like sight words, because that's what I thought. You do flashcards. That's what you do. That's how you teach them, right? That's what I thought. Let's do flashcards. Well, that wasn't working for her. We needed multi-sensory. And what that looks like is, let's say the word went. We're going to tap it out on our arm. W-E-N-T, went. We're going to do it again. Tap it out. W-E-N-T. Now we're going to air write it. W-E-N-T, right? So we can get her hands involved. We can get the memory, seeing it in her head. And when we learn words, what is your mouth doing? Went. How many syllables? WInifred. Like engaging all of the senses and being taught in a different way and using manipulatives for math. And the teachers just weren't teaching her that way. So what you find in public schools is that you get the pull-out service with the special educator or the reading specialist, but then it's not reinforced in the classroom. So therein lies the problem. And it was just a little tweak. And we played this game, Zingo, just a little sight word game. And then I incorporated, let's air write it. And I would have her air write it and say the word and then spell the word for me. But I was trying to engage her senses. And I went to YouTube because I said, what can I do at home while we were going through this process to get her the right instruction and to get her the right tutoring, and then also get her in a school that could educate her.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Hey, listen, you can keep going because this is great. You were sharing with us all of the questions that I'm going to be asking. I'm scanning over my sheet as you're talking. And again, I want to allow our listeners and our professionals here to jump on anytime. Take one of those cameras. Have any questions, please feel free to ask. But I will ask while they're deciding if they want to come. Okay, Fraser has a go ahead, Fraser.
I just giving you a link. I interviewed a woman called Ruth Ellen Henry about a year ago or something, just over a year ago, and she it was actually about dyslexia and dyspraxia, and she was telling us about she has I think she's also autistic as well, a child that's autistic, but she suffers from it and what she set up as well, because she went to all these support groups and what they were, but they were sort of kind of boring. But she set something up herself, and which is more fun and has more interaction, has better success in what she does now through because of what she set up basically. So, and we talked about dyslexia and dyspraxia and stuff at the time. So, but I'll put the link in the chat for the podcast if you wanted to listen to it regarding, and maybe you can connect with her. She's in London, so you can maybe
thank you, Fraser.
Yes. With her.
Yeah, and he just hit on like dyspraxia. There's dyslexia, which is in reading, dyscalculia, which is math, and there's also dysgraphia, which is written expression. So I think earlier when I said my daughter was writing in cursive, and I said we'll get back to that. So the dysgraphia is the written expression, and the handwriting is very sloppy. They don't space the way they're supposed to. That's when you start seeing the reversals, because I have a little cheat sheet, the letter P, D, B, and Q. I have a little cheat sheet, and I post it all the time on Instagram. It's a little flyer, and it says, you ever think about, you ever wonder what your dyslexic child is seeing when they say, well, the B and the D is the same letter, right? The B and the D is the same letter. Where if you take a chair and you turn the chair upside down, it's still a chair. This way, it's still a chair. The other way, it's still a chair. Turn it the other way, it's still a chair. So any 4 movements you do, it's still a chair. So the dyslexic brain is saying, but they're the same symbol, the B and the D. You know what I mean? So my daughter learned to write in cursive, and research shows that cursive, it works better for dyslexics because it's like drawing and it connects. And when you write in cursive, when you learn it, in order to separate the words, you have to move over. And you're drawing. So the cursive is better for dyslexic. I didn't know that at the time. She just attended a small private school, and they taught, that's all they wrote in was cursive. Then when she went to public school, that's when I told them she's going to write sloppy because she's been writing in cursive, not knowing that her penmanship was awful. She was forgetting the space because she was dysgraphic as well. And so you have dyslexia, which is reading. You have dyscalculia, which is a deficit in math. And then you have the dysgraphia, which is written expression. So, yeah.
So again, our lack of language understanding when it comes to various diagnoses of things that haven't been diagnosed, and when we're frustrated with our kids and wondering what's wrong, wondering what's wrong with the child, when in fact he or she is not receiving the assistance that they need academically. Wow, exactly. That is very strong, and I'm so happy that you went ahead and talked to us about this dysgraphia and the dyscalculia, because I myself had no idea what any of those were, and so I do appreciate that. But as we move forward, I'd like to talk a little bit about your organization, the Dyslexia Advocation. Can you share with us more about that?
Okay, so when we started this journey, like I said, although I had been an educator, I just didn't know where to go for resources and how to find help. So once she was identified as dyslexic, I learned that she must be taught, multisensory structured literacy approach and an Orton-Gillingham or OG approach, right? And I called her pediatrician in tears, because when I took her on that Wednesday after the IEP to get her assessed, they assessed her and said, I said, is she dyslexic? They said, well, we're a learning center. We don't diagnose. I said, look, I'm not that parent. Is my child dyslexic? Because at this point I needed somebody who was a professional to tell me that's what it was. And the amount of money that they told me the summer program would cost, I'm just going to share. It was over $15,000. Okay. For a summer program. For a summer intensive tutoring, over $15,000. So then I was still had in my head, I need a diagnosis. I need a diagnosis. Not realizing that everything was in that report that the school did. They just didn't identify everything and make it clear to me. Okay. So I called, I researched and said, well, how can I find someone to give me a diagnosis? I called my pediatrician. I'm basically I don't know what to do. And so she referred me to, back up, more than 15,000. So then I found out, you need a neuropsychologist. So I called a neuropsychologist. I said, I need a diagnosis. I think my daughter has dyslexia. They said, we don't accept insurance. That'll be $3,500 out of pocket. So within 2 days, I was told I needed to come up with more than $18,000 to get my 7-year-old daughter help so she could learn how to So I call my pediatrician in tears at this time. And she's like, oh my gosh, calm down. Here's a psychologist. Give her a call, you know, tell her I referred you. And this woman talked to me for 45 minutes, didn't charge me a dime. She told me to educate myself. She told me what books I should purchase. She told me to go to private schools for children with dyslexia. I'm like, there are private schools for children with dyslexia? And she told me a few of the names. They have speaking events. They do workshops. They want to educate parents to entice you to come to their school. Learn as much as you can learn. When I tell you, I ordered every book that she said that I should get. Okay. I went to Lunch and Learn in Baltimore, and I'm talking to other parents, and someone said to me, you should, have you ever heard of Decoding Dyslexia? I'm like, no, what's that? She said, Decoding Dyslexia Maryland. It's a grassroots parent-driven organization. I think you would fit in well. You ask so many great questions. You should look into them. And I looked them up, and I started going to their monthly meetings. Now, this is why dyslexia advocacy this is why it came to fruition. Everyone that helped me did not look like me.
Okay.
Everyone that helped me was white. So I'm going to this school to go to these monthly support group meetings. Well, this was a private school for children with dyslexia. I said, oh, okay, there are private schools. They cost $30,000+ a year. Okay. So then I start learning, how do you, not only do you need to get the IEP, but how do you get the correct, how do you get a robust IEP, right? They'll give you an IEP, they'll write it, and you'll go in there with this 46. Let me show you how thick this document is.
Okay.
This is one of her IEPs. This one is only 41 pages, but the first one was like 48 pages. And you have all these teachers and, you know, professionals around you that make up the IEP team talking teacher talk to you, and you sign, and you think that because they have this IEP, which is supposed to be a map on how you're going to provide services for my child for their learning style, and you trust that the school's going to do what they're supposed to do. Now, my daughter's school, I loved her school. I still love her school. I was on the board at her school. I was very involved, but they weren't teaching her how to read. Schools are underfunded. Charter schools are underfunded, traditional schools. But there's a way to get that IEP robust and full of the things that should be in there. For example, they said she had a specific learning disability. So through my research, I said, okay, she needs an Orton-Gillingham-based program, and it needs to be multi-sensory structured literacy. So I went back to the team and said, I need this IEP to say that she will be taught by someone in a multi-sensory structured literacy approach. And their response was, well, we don't put programs in the IEP. I said, well, the way this legal document is written, it's like anybody could work with my child. And we know that that won't suffice because she's not progressing. And I said, I'm not asking you to name a program. I just need a multi-sensory structured literacy approach. I don't care if it's OG, the Wilson system, Linda Moog Bell. I start naming systems. And they said, well, you know, let me get back to you. And then they later added it. But what I found is, again, everyone that helped me did not look like me. And I knew, because my daughter's father was dyslexic and didn't know it, that there was a huge gap in access to information and the right information. I thought, I'm educated, I'm smart, I'm a researcher. I didn't know these things. You can get an advocate. There's a special education attorney, and they can help you get the services and accommodations that you need, because so many of us, and I'm in Baltimore City, where 80% of fourth graders are not reading proficiently. Okay. And I'm in Baltimore City, and I worked in the urban school district, and I know for a fact that I had children that could not read. And that was my passion for saying, I want to create a space for African-American parents to feel safe, to feel comfortable, to be able to ask questions and get the support so that they can advocate successfully for their child. Because in my role now, I speak to parents who are calling and want information about my school. And I can tell by the conversation that If I give them too much information, I'm going to overwhelm them. And because it's hereditary, remember I said it's passed down in the genes?
Yes.
And I'm in Baltimore City. We're like a city country. A lot of folks don't leave Baltimore. So their parents are products of a failed special education system. Mm-hmm. And they look like me. And I worked in higher ed at a number of universities here in Baltimore City and colleges. And I saw children that look like me and parents that look like me that didn't have the information or access to information to be able to successfully advocate for their children. And that's when I came up with dyslexia advocacy plus education, to really just help African-American parents that don't know, and remove the stigma. You know, here in the United States, we have special education all wrong. Those are some of our brightest minds.
Yes.
They just learn differently.
Yes. 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 Please feel free to continue with that. And you know, that is where, again, if you allow me to say, that is unfortunately what happens too many times in the education system. Unfortunately, with that administrators that people put in position, and they make these statements. Oh, well, you know, I'll use myself. I'll just use my name as not to disparage anyone. You know, oh, well, Lars he's a really nice guy, and the kids like, hey, but is Lars doing what they need to get the education? So I'm feeling you on this. I wanted to, if we had been in church, I would have said hallelujah, hallelujah. But I'm feeling you on that. I'm telling you. Now, I know you've talked about various kinds of and I'm getting an education today. Let me say this to you, non-condescendingly, non-apologetically. I'm getting an education today, which takes me to my next question. Actually, I was going to ask, and I will still ask: are there specific tests that will confirm or refute a person being dyslexic?
Yes, they would do a comprehensive evaluation, one to check intellectual, cognitive, and then an educational evaluation. And that's why you've got to be able to tap into the correct resources, right? Because that evaluation, this is what, 2019. My daughter had the IEP in 2017, and then we had independent. That's another topic to talk about. We had an independent educational evaluation. After I shed the tears, I did go to a hospital and get an evaluation, and insurance was accepted. But like I'm not a psychologist. You know, I don't really understand what the numbers and what the report says. And what I realized is the evaluation that the school did confirmed dyslexia. Okay. They just didn't say it. So they do an educational evaluation, looking at cognitive and education, because their job to determine eligibility for an IEP is to see if that disability fits into one of the 13 disability categories. So the evaluation that the school does, it will identify dyslexia. Yes. But therein, when you have maybe a school psychologist that's not that versed in reading and how people learn to read, right? Because you have to be versed with psychology, the science of reading, and education. Mm-hmm. So that school psychologist, just by nature of education, and you know how segmented it is, right? It's just you learn this. They may not know. They may not, because my daughter's school, she was at a charter school that was project-based arts integration. In hindsight, without even knowing she was dyslexic, that was the best learning environment I could have put her in. You know, they did hands-on, a lot of project-based work and infusing the arts throughout the curriculum. But she just wasn't getting enough of the services. We needed 45 minutes every day of an Orton Gillingham-based program. You know, she just wasn't getting it. They couldn't do it. Logan, did you get pull out today? Well, no, they had part testing. She had to go. Logan, did you get it? Well, no, she hurt herself. She's out. They just weren't able to meet her needs. But the schools, I want to make it clear that when the school does the evaluation, they can identify. They will maybe push back and say they don't diagnose. Okay. And it's all about terminology and how you say things. They don't diagnose, but they will identify. Yes. So in hindsight, I didn't need that independent educational evaluation, but I didn't know that.
Okay.
I didn't know. I just felt like, who's going to diagnose? She needs the diagnosis. And I didn't know.
Okay. Now, if we can just segue back for a moment, Pat, feel free to come on and ask the question. But Pat has a question. If a journalist wanted to write an instructional article about IEPs, would he or she be restricted to the beginning of the school year, particularly speaking? And Pat, feel free to come on and explain yourself. But and obviously Winifred can speak to that because we both are school individuals, and there are so many laws that go with special needs students and that kind of thing. And a journalist, from my experience and what little expertise I have, would be a paper, but it would not be seen as a I'm trying to say this gingerly, as a viable piece of information other than you may be sharing if you're quoting the professionals that have the experience, etc. But it still would not be received as a quote professional piece of information on IEP. Only the fact that you would be repeating or regurgitating what the specialists were saying. If that answers your question, I may have not answered your question. And also, Winifred, if you don't, Winifred, I'm sorry, if you don't mind expounding on that as well.
Yeah, if that was her question, that is very important because you want to be able to state facts and evidence-based and research-based articles and research that's been done that's proven successful. So whenever I was in an IEP meeting and they might have said something, like I was in a meeting, this book here, Dyslexia Advocate, How to Advocate for a Child with Dyslexia Within the Public Education System. This woman has trained educators. She's been in this space. I had this book with me. I didn't just say something out of the book. I said, oh, okay, and I just read it out of the book. And then I have this here, Dyslexia in the Classroom, What Every Teacher Needs to Know. This is produced by the International Dyslexia Association. So I took credible articles and research-based, evidence-based documentation with me because that is what the research says. It's been proven to be successful. And that's very important because they will then, they don't have to even accept the independent educational evaluation. They don't have to accept it. You can go get one and say, hey, this is what this doctor says. They don't have to accept it. So if that was your question, Patricia, please clarify for us if that was your question, if that's what you were asking.
Not sort of. Well, basically, hello first.
Hi.
Hi, Pat.
My brother had dyslexia. That was a long time ago. But my question, though, is basically this. I do have an online community paper, and I have met parents. I went to a meeting once and was shocked. There was a parent who had a child with a disability, and this particular parent was from the projects, and this child had made it all the way through high school, was doing very poorly in school, very poorly. And to my disbelief, the parent had never heard of an IEP. And I was like, how can you have a child with a disability and not know an IEP? And I discovered they're not really being told because they figure, oh, well, they're not going to do well anyway because they're just poor kids. So that's probably, I hope that's not what they're thinking, but it seems that that's what they might have been thinking. So I would like to, I've done it in the past, but knowing that it's already March, my question really was, would it be worth my readers' while for me to write an article, a how-to article on IEP as late as March? I don't even know if it would do any good. Would I have to wait till August?
No, I want you to write that article March, April, May, June,
Yes,
July,
yes.
August, September, October, November, December.
Yes.
It is not too late.
Oh.
It is not too late because they don't have to wait till the beginning of the year to ask for an evaluation.
Oh, they don't.
You can ask for an evaluation. My daughter, when we did the IEP process, it was in May. She was tested in June, and she was even tested over the summer for her the OT, occupational therapy evaluation happened at summer camp because they had 60 days. They had a certain number of days that they needed to get her evaluated, and we started at the very end of the year. And then the start of second grade is when she was approved. She was deemed eligible, and we implemented the IEP. But absolutely, it would be beneficial because there's a stigma around special education services. And I say that special education services. It's not a room you go to. Okay. It's not the special education room. It's special education services. And I worked with a parent in higher ed. Her son could not pass math, this math class. He needed the math class to take another class, and then he would have earned his associate's degree. And she's talking to me, and she says he has ADHD. And we know that with some of these disabilities, they co-occur. So like my daughter's dyslexic and ADHD combined, right? And the mother was talking to me, and I said, oh, wait a minute, he's ADHD? I said, well, didn't he have an IEP in high school? Oh, no. He doesn't want to use that. I said, no, ma'am. No, it doesn't go away. When you can't see, you put on your glasses, you can see.
I'll grow it, huh?
You know? But there was this stigma around him using accommodations and services in college. And this was a Black family as well. Oh, he didn't want to use that. I'm like, no, he needs that to be successful. So it would definitely be beneficial to your readers if you wrote an article on the IEP process. Absolutely.
I will do that. Okay, I will definitely do that. Okay.
Yes.
And Pat, Ms. Winston, let me also say to Pat, and you can expound as well. What a lot of people do not understand about education, they sit up and they applaud, and Ms. Winston and I were talking before the broadcast. They applaud, excuse me, Joe Clark because of the things he was able to do in his school. And you guys already know my story, probably only Ms. Winston doesn't, about working at George Washington Preparatory High School with Dr. George McKenna. George McKenna movie premiered in 1986. Denzel played, etc. However, what you don't see in the movie, the things behind the scenes, like Ms. Winston is talking about now, is when you have to challenge the quote teachers, you have to challenge your superintendents, your curriculum persons, etc. Because many times they don't have the knowledge, and then they, quite honestly, they don't like the fact that you have the knowledge, because what is that going to do? I share with Ms. Winston that my family and I are friends with the Venus and Serena Williams family because of that very thing. You as an administrator, when you go to parents, and I do a workshop called When Parents Go to School. As an administrator, when you go to parents and you start explaining to them the very things that Ms. Winston is talking about, and she's schooling me today because I was not familiar with all the different forms of dyslexia, and then you arm the parents, and the parents go to the school board office upset and asking for monies and funds to help their children. And then, as she's already stated, schools are underfunded. So now the school district is upset with that administrator, me having been in that position many times, because you have shared information with the parent. You have let them know what they need for their child to actually get help. So therein is a major problem. So I please allow me to just piggyback on what Ms. Winston is saying. Hey, by all means, you need to continue to write that. Go ahead, Ms. Winston.
Add to give a little additional background with me. I worked as an administrator at central office for almost 4 years for our public school system here in the city. So I managed 65 elementary, middle schools. I've gone into several elementary schools and seen data where I know that kindergarten children make no gain. I've been in schools where I knew the special educator was ineffective. But the process to terminate a teacher, the union is fierce. I knew intimately on that level. And then you add, after that, I had been a teacher for almost 2 academic years in the high school. So although because as a mom, I was intimidated and I was just overwhelmed by that 48-page document, that background allowed me to have hard conversations with principals and the people around that table, because in my role, I would have to tell principals who they had to let go in their school to manage their budget. So I had to have hard conversations to tell a principal, you have to let a science teacher go because we can't let the custodian go because the way the union contract is set up. You can't let the union, the custodian go, even though you don't need that many. but you got to let a science teacher go. That's a hard conversation.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So professionally, I was accustomed to putting them in their place. Like, I wasn't hesitant really, but as a mom, as someone who served on the board at her school, as someone who was so involved, I did parent tours at her school.
Mhm.
I volunteered to give tours for potential parents. It was uncomfortable for me because I really liked her school. It was very uncomfortable. I go to an IEP meeting, and then the next night I'm on the board, I'm the secretary taking notes, and I'm hearing information that our numbers in special education are now double digits. And then my administrator had to go up, and I'm like, wait a minute. We don't have that money. We can't program. We went from, I'm going to just give an arbitrary number. We went from 6% special education kids to 13%. I know what that means as far as staffing and money. So I wore multiple hats. I'm looking at it from multiple lenses. And all I'm thinking is, my only child has to learn how to read. This is my baby. You learn to read K-3. After that, you're reading to learn. And so I had a lot of intimate information, which made it uncomfortable, but it also allowed me, unlike other parents, to get information that other parents wouldn't have access to. And I was able to send my IEP to 3 different special educators and say, tell me what you see.
And it's really good you started so early, because your child was 7, whereas my brother did horribly in school, and it wasn't, they didn't figure out what his problem was until he was in like 7th or 8th grade. By then he had already given up. He never did really.
Her dad's dyslexic. We didn't find out until she was identified.
Yeah.
He says
Wow.
it was like a light bulb that went off. And I thought about other people like him. And what you find, and what I knew from my experience, is children act out when they're bored, right? You're not challenging them enough. Children act out when they don't know, right? They act out when they don't know. And then you have the children who sit quietly and are obedient and compliant and very nice. And my daughter, like me, is very likable. She's very nice. And she's going to do everything you tell her to do. And she's going to be quiet. And she's not going to be disruptive. And guess what? She's going to get overlooked. This is what I kept thinking. She's going to get overlooked in that classroom of 25, 30 children, because they're focused on the kids that are being disruptive, right? And they have behavior issues. And her dad shared that what he would do when it was time for him to read out loud, he would make an inappropriate joke or say something, make a comment that had nothing to do with it. So he would distract the teacher from whatever he needed to read so they could move on. And he was a very a compliant child. He didn't get in trouble. His mom was really strict on him and his twin brother, but he just got pushed through because he was nice. He wasn't a problem. And he didn't find out till his mid-40s.
Wow.
Right.
You know what? Perfect segue to the next question as we get ready to close this thing down here. Now, are there hotlines or support groups for this specific challenge?
Yes.
That are out there?
Yes. For me, Decoding Dyslexia, if you go to decodingdyslexia.net, that was a lifeline for me. There's one in every state, and then when you get by state, they even break it down by jurisdictions. So decodingdyslexia.net, and you find your state and you join, and then they'll connect you to your local jurisdiction, because in order to have an impact, we have to start at the local level. So like, I'm here in Maryland, and ours is Decoding Dyslexia Maryland. And I co-founded our Baltimore City chapter with 2 other parents, January, where we host monthly advocacy and support group meetings for parents with dyslexia and other language learning differences. And I invite any parent who's involved in special education to come, because they can learn something about that IEP process. But I would say join a support group. What I found is someone else is going through this. Someone else's child has dyslexia, but you're not meeting people talking about, oh yeah, my child got an SLD diagnosis. How about yours? But I advocate and I talk about it, and join a support group. Decodingdyslexia.net is a great start. Another great website is understood.org. Understood.org. And they have a lot of information about dyslexia and ADHD. And Rights Law. Rights Law is an excellent website for special education law, and it's Pete and Pam Wright, and they have this book From Emotions to Advocacy, but Rights Law. And I will just give you a heads up, that website is very intense. Okay, you stay for 10 minutes, you time yourself. That's what a psychologist told me. And you get off of that website and then go back another day because it's really intense about special education.
That intense. Wow.
Yes, it really is. It really is, because it talks about the law, you know, federal law. And then you have the federal law, and then each state has different rules and laws around education. Like here in Maryland, we're trying to decode dyslexia. We're trying to get legislation to pass the Ready to Read Act for early screening and intervention.
Wow. Well, listen, wow, you have, man, listen, you have really laid out a lot of information here. Let's talk a little bit about your upcoming publication.
Oh, yes, yes. So, in delving into this space, and my daughter is, she's an only child. She's my only child. She has an older sister from her dad, but it just made me think about my mom and reevaluate our relationship. My mother is deceased. She's been gone since 2000. And
condolences. Condolences.
Thank you. And I got to give the backstory. Ancestry.com.
Please do. Please do.
I have 8 siblings. Okay, I have 8 siblings. My dad married his first wife at 17. They had 4 children. Then he married my mom. She already had 2. They had 2 together. Then you add a younger brother. Well, as life would have it, Ancestry.com, I found another sister found me. I signed up for Ancestry to learn my ethnicity. I watched the Book of Negroes, and I wanted to know where I was from. And this young lady, my sister Audra, she joined to find her father, our father. And she reached out to me, and I was in a very emotional state at the time because I kept thinking about how hard I'm working for my daughter, and how hard my mom must have worked for the 4 of us. She's a book publishing consultant, and she is a 4-time Amazon bestseller, and she is the visionary author for anthologies. And I had just paid a book coach because I wanted to write a book. Well, I meet my sister, and she's a publishing consultant, a book publishing consultant, 4-time Amazon bestselling author, and I will be featured in her
and what's her name again? I'm going to put it in the box. I'm going to put her name in the box.
Audra R. Upchurch.
Okay. Audra, A-R-D.
A-U-R. Look, I got to write it.
A-U-D-R-I-A.
A-U-D-R-A.
Okay, Upchurch.
Yep. Audra R. Upchurch. And she has 2 anthologies coming out in 2019, and I'm a co-author in one. Fiercely Speaking is one book, and then the next one is Unchain Me Mama, Journey to Forgiveness.
Unchain Me Mama.
Unchain Me Mama, Journey to Forgiveness. And growing up, I had a lot of anger towards my mom. I had siblings that were drug addicts. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, when crack was just really bad in the 80s. And then my mom had a stroke. And then she passed. So the last 2 years of her life, I took care of her. I was her primary caregiver, me and my older sister. But going through this fight with Logan, I was willing to give up everything. You know, she is now in a private school for children with dyslexia. I made it happen. Could we afford it? No, but I made it happen. You know, she didn't do the plus $15,000 tutoring, but she did tutoring at that center with group tutoring, which was at a lesser cost. We couldn't afford it, but I made it happen. And so I was just so emotional, and I wanted to share my journey of forgiveness with my mom, because mental illness runs in our family. And then I was sexually assaulted when I was 18 years old, and that really caused friction with me and my mom. And I wanted to share my journey to forgiveness now that I'm a mom and I know that what parents sacrifice and how much we put our children first. And I wanted to share my testimony about forgiving my mom. And so that's when I wrote my chapter about my journey to forgiveness, which will come out in the book. And what I wanted, one of the quotes that I use in the book is by Maya Angelou. I can be changed by what happens to me, but I refuse to be reduced by it. And I felt like that just encompassed everything about my childhood, my relationship with my mother, and who I am today. So it was just a lot of emotion meeting this new sister who, by the way, 6 years older than me, grew up in the same neighborhood in Brooklyn, New York. We have so much in common. We both run because I still run. And my daughter, by the way, ran her first 5K at 7 years old. Let me throw that in there.
Is that right? Wow.
Yes, that is right. And me and this new sister are closer than I would have ever imagined. And we talk almost every day, if not every other day. And it was just a space I was in. And I wanted to share about my mom because I have thought about her often and a lot going through this journey to get my daughter what she needs.
Wow, man! Listen, what a powerful, powerful, powerful story. I mean, you're gonna have to come back because we're gonna talk about that exclusively. Yes. I know, I'm very serious. You know, we will have to talk about that exclusively because you already know. You don't need me to tell you. People go through so many things in their lives until it's very. If I can use the word debilitating, if we're not careful. Is very debilitating, and my mom and my sister having similar issues even to this very day, because of some things that transpired many years ago and just some things that you've shared. I think my sister still, even though my sister
mommy issues, they talk about daddy issues. You always hear that, but a lot of women have issues and dysfunctional relationships with their moms for whatever reason. Yeah. And I just thought it was, I've always been a sharer and I've always been very transparent. And I just felt like this was very difficult for me and it needed to be told. The story needed to be told. So I said, you know what? I share everything else. I'm going to share this because I want to help someone else.
Yeah, that's powerful. And you're absolutely right. Being a man, usually people talk about dads and guys not having their dads, and this is why this is why that, and the women do get left out. They do get left out, and then you marry, unfortunately, or you date some person that's not worthy of you, and then the angst continues. So listen, I'm hearing you. That's why I'm sharing is that you have to come back so that we can actually address that topic as well. I am a huge advocate for women. I'm a huge advocate against domestic violence and the whole nine. And you and I could talk all night about that issue. But it's about time for us to close this show down. And I just want you, if you will, to share with us how we might contact you.
Absolutely. You can reach me on all social media platforms. Winning with WInifred, and my name, WInifred A. WInston.
I'm going to type this in here. Winning, is it all one word? Winning with WInifred.
Yep.
I'm sorry.
Yep. Winning with WInifred, WINIFRED. That's Twitter. That's Facebook. And then my name, WInifred A. WInston. You can find me on LinkedIn, Instagram, all social media platforms. Winning with WInifred and WInifred A. WInston.
Okay.
And my group is Dyslexia Advocation. But you can find me Winning with WInifred and WInifred A. WInston on all social media.
Fantastic. I'm gonna put those up. Well, listen, wow. I can say again, I've gotten an education tonight, WInifred, and it's been just fabulous. And I do want us to talk again once we get off air and find out exactly when we might want to reschedule and really talk about your book exclusively and talk about the mommy issues and those kinds of things, because it's certainly a topic that needs to be covered. So we just want to thank you again for coming on the Nobody Asked Me Guy show. And I'm just thrilled. And for those individuals that may be interested in contacting me, this is a Nobody Asked Me Guy show. The best way to contact me is to go to my website, www.dyingonmyfeet.com. Once you get there, you will find all of my social media outlets, from LinkedIn to Twitter, etc., on down the line. Some of our listeners already know, Wendy, that I am a writer and a poet. My latest book that's going to debut Mother's Day is called Mothers and Their Smen, an introspective look at mothers rearing their sons. My book is already available now. It's called, the book itself is called Dying on My Feet, My Journey ×2. I'm a acute promyelocytic leukemia survivor. I was given zero chance to survive over 28 years ago. I've been cancer-free 26 years, and I'm still here kicking around. My latest poetry book is called Mind Muscle. And Winnie and I will talk about that. If I can call it, WInifred and I will talk about that as well. It's a book of poetry of 101 poems. It's the fourth of my poetry books that I've written. So we just want you to know that we appreciate you being here. Please share this video. This video is available, on YouTube. It's also available on Facebook. Please share it with your friends. Have them to subscribe to our pages. And please, please, please go to Ms. WInifred Winston's pages and make sure you contact her, make sure you friend her information, and make sure you be listening for her to return again. Now, next week, Ms. Winston, we are going to have Dr. Mills. Dr. Mills is the president of the University of Ghana in Ga West, over in Ghana, Africa. But unfortunately, since the time difference is so great, we normally debut at 7 p.m., but we're going to debut at 3 p.m., and it's going to be 10 p.m. his time. So we're going to go early, but it will be recorded. And then following Dr. Mills, our next guest on the 22nd will be none other than Miss Sharissa Monroe. She's the daughter of Dr. Miles Monroe, and she'll be here with us on the 22nd. And so we are blessed to have a lot of interesting guests coming on. None more interesting than Ms. WInifred Winston. We're going to have Ms. Winston back again. So guys, with that, we want to thank each and every one of you again for being here, and all of our friends, Ms. Pat and Dr. Tachi and Kente and some of the guys that have to do other things, that they may have shows tonight themselves. So we just thank you very much for joining us. And with that, we're going to bid everyone a good night, and God bless you.